Okay, today I wanted to go through some stuff on adjectives, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page with adjectives, to make sure that you all understand them, because I do know that some people can find them a bit complicated sometimes. So, first things first then, the way that adjectives are formed. So, adjectives are formed in a few different ways. The worst way that adjectives are formed are when they're third declension, but when they're first and second declension, it's dead easy, okay, because we already know these. So we call these particular adjectives us, a, So for example, bonus, meaning good, okay, this declines in the same way as second declension masculine, first declension, and second declension neuter nouns. So, for example, if I was giving something to the good boy, because adjectives have to match the noun they describe in person, case, and gender, then we need to, a number, then we need to make sure that that it is in the dative. So if we're looking for the good boy, okay, it would be dative singular. So it would be puero bono, okay. So if you were talking about the nominative good girls, for example, or good slave girls even, then we could have the boni and killi, okay, with that ae nominative plural ending there. So as I say, adjectives match the noun they describe in gender, case, and number, okay. So gender being whether they're masculine or feminine or neuter. Case as in whether they're nominative, accusative, genitive, dative or ablative. And number whether they're singular or plural, okay. Now, I mentioned before that third declension adjectives are our problematic adjectives, and this is true, they are a bit problematic due to the way that they're formed. So they're formed in three different ways, which you don't really need to know. What you just need to be aware of is the endings that third declension adjectives have, okay? So, for example, we can have I endings for the dative and ablative, okay? We've got ibis endings for the dative and ablative plural, and ia, is, as, and for the other endings. It's just something worth you being aware of, just so that you don't sort of get tripped up on it, okay? Don't worry about it too much though. It's not like I'm asking you to make sure that you learn this off by heart, okay? So, quick word about superlative adjectives then. Now, I know that most of you do recognise these, but I am still seeing a couple of people getting tripped up on them. So I wanted to just make sure that everyone is aware of how they're formed and also how they decline, okay? So superlative adjectives are quite similar to us, adjectives, in the sense of they follow these endings, okay? However, superlative adjectives have a stem on them before these endings, okay? So they have isimus, isima, isimum endings, or erimus, erima, erimum, depending on whether they are masculine, feminine, or neuter adjectives, okay? So quite easy to describe, to recognise really, because you've got either that double S there or that double R, which shows that it means the most or very, okay? So Miss Allen was the most impressed teacher with her knowledge of students' vocabulary, or Miss Allen was the worst teacher because she didn't go through third declension adjectives with her students. So the most or very, okay, for superlatives. Comparative adjectives can be a little bit more complicated, and I know that a couple of people did trip up on comparative adjectives, so I wanted to go into these into a bit more detail with these to make sure that you do understand them. Okay, comparative adjectives tell us that it's more, okay, so better, greater, harder, better, faster, stronger, etc. Okay, so in Latin, they're reasonably easy to spot. Okay, we can spot them by the ending ior or ios. Okay, so for example, miserios is more miserable, pulchrior is more beautiful. Again, comparative adjectives do decline because they've got to match in person, case, and case, number, and gender. Okay, so litior, for example, as you can see, we've got a couple of ways that this can decline. Well, that any comparative adjective can decline, but hopefully you will have noticed a pattern here. So eor, eorem, eoris, eori, eori, eores, eores, eorum, eoribus, eoribus. Hopefully you have realised that comparative adjectives are somewhat similar to adjectives of the third declension. Okay? So, if they are neuter, it becomes a little bit more complicated because they match the third declension neuter endings rather than the third declension masculine feminine noun endings. So one of the things that some people tripped up on in particular in the last translation was the use of comparatives with quam. Alright, so quam can mean a lot of things, but when a comparative is used alongside quam, it means than. So the two things that are compared will both be in the same case. You will have your comparative and you will have quam. So for example, Ancilla stultior est quam servus, the slave girl is more stupid than the slave. So you can see that ancilla and servus are both nominative singular. Okay? There is another way that we can use comparatives. This is something that I want to flag up to you now, but we're going to go into more detail with it in year 11. Okay, so you guys all know about the ablative case. The ablative case means by, with, or from. But it can be used, the ablative case can be used as a way of comparing things instead of using the word quam. Alright, so hopefully when I ask you about this, when we come to it in year 10 or year 11, you will maybe be able to tell me that the ablative has different uses. So, when it's an ablative of comparison, the word quam is missed out. Instead, the thing that's being compared is put into the ablative case. So if you remember, I've used the same example as the last one so that you can see the difference between them. So when it's used with quam, ancilla stultior est quam servus. When it's used with the ablative of comparison, ancilla stultior est servo. So you can see that it's a shorter way, a more concise way of saying the slave girl is more stupid than the slave. Okay, so you'll notice that the thing being compared, the slave, sewo, is put into the ablative case. Okay, now if you don't particularly understand the ablative of comparison, I don't want you to worry too much about it, because what's really important is the moment you understand comparatives with quam. Okay? There are some problems that we can encounter with comparatives, okay? The first one being that quam, you will probably have already learnt that quam normally means how in the sense of a question, all right? You will have also noticed, because we've done a lot about relative clauses, that the relative pronoun qui, quai, quod also includes quam in its declensions, okay? But it's a different word that's spelled the same. It's not actually the same word, okay? Sort of like, I don't know, lead and lead, I guess. Lead, the metal, and to lead somebody, you know, or a dog on a lead as well. So, one last thing that you should be aware of is the adverb multo, okay, which means by much, okay. It's probably easy for you to just be able to recognise that when it's used with a comparative, it just means much, alright? So, ancilla multo stultior est quam servus. The slave girl is much more stupid than the slave. Okay? It's not something that we're going to encounter too much at the moment, but I just want you to be aware of these problems so that, you know, you can see that these are common misconceptions and hopefully you can avoid them. So, one last thing that I wanted to mention then was that there is such a thing as an irregular adjective. So, instead of following the, you know, just one adjective being used through the comparative, the adjective, the comparative, and the superlative. So, for example, if longus, all right, meaning long. So, longus would be the adjective for that. Longior would be the comparative, and the superlative would be longissimus, all right? So you would expect an adjective to follow that pattern. These are some adjectives that don't follow that pattern, adjectives that have different words depending on whether it is an adjective, a comparative, or a superlative. All right, so bonus, melior, and optimus, you probably already know most of these. Magnus, major, and maximus, meaning great, greater, and greatest. Malus, paior, pessimus, bad, worse, and the worst. Parvus, minor, minimus, small, smaller, smallest. If anyone ever calls me Miss Minimus, I will have to do something very, very nasty. All right? Don't call me Miss Minimus. Multus, plus, and plurimus, much, more, and the most. So these are just for you to be aware of whether they are an adjective, a comparative, or a superlative. Okay.